Agreed. Mr. Walden?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our panelists for being here today. The first question I have, given the complexity of this legislation, I just want to make sure each of you has actually read the draft bill in its entirety. Can you give me a yes or no? Have you read it in its entirety?
I haven't had time to read all 600 pages.
648, but that's...
I have not had time to read all 648 pages.
Neither have I.
Ms. Jackson?
Nor have I. My staff have certainly read through it.
Okay, well then I want to draw your attention to a couple of issues. First of all, I come from a district that's very rural, 70,000 square miles, home to 11 national forests, where we have all kinds of catastrophic fires and enormous overgrowth of wood fiber. Is there a scientific reason, Dr. Chu, for excluding woody biomass off federal land under the definition on page 8 of biomass? And why would the administration support that exclusion?
Well, the administration will be working with the draft of this bill.
Do you support this draft? Do you support the definition of biomass as found on page 8?
I would certainly look forward to working with you in terms of looking at how biomass is defined.
Okay, well, biomass is defined right now on page 8 as you couldn't take any of this off federal land. Federal land is completely excluded. I'd love to know the scientific reason for doing that. Second, there are all these other definitions that private timber growers in my part of the world tell me would basically make it impossible for them to participate in woody biomass development, whether that's a chip plant, whether that's a pellet plant, whether that is all the stuff that's being invested in right now. And yet our Department of Environmental Quality in Oregon says basically there's virtually no emissions from heating sources that come that are heated with the wood pellets. This is a disc. They want to make these in my district using woody biomass off private and federal ground, put it in a mix with coal-burning power plant, reduce carbon emissions and improve efficiencies, and yet under this legislation, you couldn't do that. It wouldn't count. Let me move on to hydro. Is hydropower renewable or not?
Hydropower is renewable.
Can you give me the scientific reason for why hydropower prior to 2001 is not renewable in this legislation?
I think whether it's included in this legislation or not, just like the definition of biomass, is not a scientific question.
Okay, I agree. So there is no scientific reason. It's a political reason.
Well, I think the issue here is with hydropower, one wants to encourage new forms of renewable.
Okay, let me go to that. Page 11, new forms. It says the hydroelectric project installed on the dam is operated so that the water surface elevation at any given location and time that would have occurred in the absence of the hydroelectric project is maintained subject to the license, et cetera, et cetera. Now, my understanding, we have a lot of wind energy in my district. All this synergy is with the hydro system being able to store water when the wind's blowing and be able to balance out the load. This is Bonneville Power. Apologies to my colleagues here. This is wind energy, 1,000 megawatts that dropped to 0. This is the hydro system. Now, is there any way that new hydro could be used to balance out, thank you, balance out wind energy if the pool level cannot be modified?
Actually, I think that especially in Oregon and with the Bonneville Power Administration, this is something I hardly not only support, but I'm encouraging them to look at pumped storage as a method of storing wind energy.
Right, and I don't have any problem with that. I think it's great, but you're going to store that behind some dam, right?
That's correct.
And you're going to affect the level somewhere, aren't you, if you add hydro? If you add a hydro facility? Could we meet this definition that says at no time and in no location behind a facility that the water level could change because you added hydro? How would you ever meet that?
Well, I must confess I'm not familiar with this particular part of the bill.
Page 11. And with all due respect, I'm going to move on because I only have 40 seconds. Back to Ms. Jackson. In your EPA evaluation of the cost of this legislation, you only included, if I heard you correctly, the cap and trade provisions, correct? In your analysis?
Correct. EPA was asked to model what the impact of the cap and trade.
Okay, so in your model, since I've not had a chance to read through it, what % did you allocate to auction? What % were allocated credits? And what cost per ton of carbon did you factor in your model?
The allowance price that came out of EPA's analysis in 2012 is $12 to $15 a ton, $17 to $22 a ton in 2020. And I forgot the other part of your question.
Percent of auction and percent of allocation.
Yeah, the model did not, I believe, I can double check this for you, but I don't believe that question needed to be answered in order for the modeling to occur.
Gentlemen,
But I will double check.
Because that
Gentlemen's
hasn't been
time.
answered in the draft text either.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank
Ms.
the
Capps?
witnesses.